Fine, Felix, if you're going to leave, then leave. The words had barely escaped Hyunjin's mouth when Felix stopped with his hand on the studio door. For 3 seconds nobody moved. The music continued playing from the speakers, an upbeat track completely wrong for the silence that had swallowed the room. A thin strand of Felix's blonde hair clung to his damp forehead. His chest rose and fell beneath his black t-shirt, his breathing still uneven from rehearsal. Hyunjin had imagined this moment 100 different ways. He had imagined Felix glaring at him. He had imagined Felix demanding an explanation. He had imagined Felix finally admitting that he was jealous. He had even imagined Felix walking away for a few minutes before coming back, because Felix always came back. He had never imagined the way Felix looked at him now, not angry, not jealous, just tired. Okay, Felix said quietly. Hyunjin's smile disappeared. Felix opened the door. Wait. The word came out instinctively. Felix stopped again, but he didn't turn around. Hyunjin swallowed. A minute ago he had been laughing with someone else deliberately. He had leaned close, whispered something into their ear, and watched from the corner of his eye as Felix's expression slowly changed. It had been childish, it had been intentional, and it had worked too well. Felix, Hyunjin said. Felix finally turned. What? Hyunjin suddenly had nothing. The studio smelled of sweat, polished wood, and the faint citrus scent of the drink Felix had left untouched beside the mirror. Their reflections stood side by side in the glass, but somehow they looked like strangers. Hyunjin forced a laugh. You're seriously leaving because of that? Felix stared at him. Because of what? You know what? No. Felix's voice remained frighteningly calm. I don't. Hyunjin's fingers tightened around the hem of his shirt. You've been acting weird all week. Eyebrows lifted slightly. Me? Yes, you. A bitter little smile appeared on Felix's lips. Interesting. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're the one who's been acting weird. Hyunjin looked away. There it was, the accusation he had been avoiding. For days, Hyunjin had deliberately created tiny wounds and then watched Felix pretend they didn't hurt. He had laughed too loudly at other people's jokes. He had chosen someone else as his partner during breaks. He had casually mentioned how comfortable he felt around other people. Whenever Felix entered a room, Hyunjin somehow found a reason to be standing beside somebody else. He had wanted Felix to notice. He had wanted Felix to feel something. Most of all, he had wanted Felix to prove that Hyunjin mattered. But Felix had never confronted him. That silence had driven Hyunjin further. Tonight, he had pushed too far. I was just joking, Hyunjin said. Felix looked at him for a long moment. You always say that after you hurt someone. Hyunjin froze. The music suddenly seemed louder. Picked up his jacket. Hyunjin watched his fingers move with careful precision as he folded the sleeve before putting it over his arm. That tiny habit suddenly hurt more than anger would have. Felix always folded his clothes neatly when he was upset. Hyunjin knew that. He knew because he had spent years paying attention to things about Felix that he pretended not to notice. Where are you going? Home. Not staying. Felix gave him a strange look. Why would I? Hyunjin opened his mouth. Nothing came. Felix nodded as though that silence had answered him. Exactly. Walked out. The door closed softly, not slammed, not dramatically, softly. That was somehow worse. Hyunjin remained motionless. He stared at the door, then at the empty place where Felix had been standing, then at the reflection in the mirror. His own face looked unfamiliar. What did I just do? The answer arrived before he could lie to himself. He had tried to make Felix jealous. He had never considered that Felix might decide he was done. And that was how Hyunjin discovered that there was a difference between wanting someone to chase you and giving them a reason to stop. The next morning, Felix was already gone when Hyunjin arrived. Usually, Felix was one of the first people in the practice room. He would arrive with sleepy eyes and messy hair, carrying something sweet that he insisted everyone should try. Usually, he would greet Hyunjin first. Not today. Hyunjin stood in the doorway with 2 coffees in his hands. One was his, the other was Felix's. He had bought it automatically. That was the worst part. His body remembered Felix even when his pride refused to. Hyunjin placed the second coffee on the floor beside Felix's usual spot. He stared at it, then picked it up again. He threw it away. The plastic cup landed inside the trash can with a hollow sound. A few minutes later, Felix entered. Hyunjin's head snapped up. Felix was wearing a gray hoodie and headphones around his neck. His expression was neutral. Morning, someone called. Felix smiled. Morning. Hyunjin waited. Felix didn't look at him. He walked straight past. Hyunjin felt something inside his chest tight. Felix, stop. What? About last night? We don't have to talk about it. Yes, we do. Felix's eyes finally met his. There was no accusation in them that made it worse. I said something stupid. You did. I didn't mean it. Looked down. Which part? Hyunjin's confidence vanished. The part where I told you to leave. Nodded slowly. Right. I heard you. That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? Hyunjin searched for an answer. He couldn't tell Felix the truth. Not yet. I wanted you to be jealous. I wanted you to care enough to fight for me. I wanted proof that I wasn't imagining whatever existed between us. Those words felt humiliating, so instead he said, I was angry. Felix's expression softened for half a second. Then it disappeared. Okay, yes, not mad. Felix smiled faintly. Tired. Hyunjin's heart sank. Tired of me? Felix didn't answer immediately. That hesitation was enough. Felix, tired of guessing. Hyunjin went still. Guessing what? Whether you actually want me around. The room seemed to shrink. Felix rubbed his thumb against the edge of his phone. Another habit Hyunjin knew too well. When you're nice to me, I wonder if it means something. When you suddenly pull away, I wonder what I did wrong. When you act like I'm important one day and like I'm invisible the next, I keep trying to understand. Hyunjin's throat tightened. Felix laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. And then I realized something. What? Maybe there's nothing to understand. Hyunjin stared at him. Felix put his headphones on. The conversation was over. For the first time, Hyunjin understood what fear actually felt like. It wasn't Felix yelling. It wasn't Felix crying. It wasn't even Felix walking away. It was Felix becoming calm enough to stop needing an answer. Days passed. Felix remained polite. That was almost unbearable. He still laughed with everyone. He still participated in rehearsals. He still helped when someone forgot a step. He still smiled at Hyunjin when necessary, but something had changed. The small invisible thread between them seemed to have been cut. Hyunjin noticed everything. Felix no longer waited for him after practice. He no longer sent photographs of random things that reminded him of Hyunjin. He stopped stealing Hyunjin's snacks. He stopped leaning against him when he was tired. He stopped saying, "Come with me." Hyunjin discovered that he had taken every one of those things for granted. One evening, Hyunjin found Felix alone in the hallway. Felix was sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, scrolling through his phone. Felix looked up. Hyunjin sat beside him. Felix shifted slightly, leaving space between them. The movement was small. Hyunjin felt it like a slap. "You avoiding me?" "No, you are," sighed Hyunjin. "What? You wanted space." "I never said I wanted space. You told me to leave." "I was angry. I left." Hyunjin stared at the floor. "I didn't think you'd actually do it." Slowly turned his head. That sentence had escaped before Hyunjin could stop it. "What did you think I would do?" Hyunjin looked at him. "Stay." Felix's expression changed. Something fragile moved behind his eyes. "Why?" Hyunjin couldn't answer. "Why would I stay after you told me to go?" "Because." Voice failed. Felix waited. Hyunjin looked down at his hands. "Because I wanted you to prove you loved me." The thought was so frightening that he couldn't say it. Felix stood. Hyunjin looked up. "Where are you going?" "I have somewhere to be." "With who?" The question came too quickly. Felix's eyebrows rose. Hyunjin immediately regretted it. "With someone," Felix answered. Hyunjin felt the old jealousy flare. The same jealousy he had deliberately created in Felix now burned through him. "Who?" Felix smiled, not cruelly, almost sadly. "Does it matter?" Hyunjin stood too, stared at him. "Why?" "Because I hate the idea of somebody else getting the version of you I pushed away." Hyunjin's chest hurt. He stopped. Felix waited another second, then he nodded. "That's what I thought." Walked away. Hyunjin remained in the hallway. For once there was no clever game, no teasing, no excuse. Only the terrible realization that he had finally made Felix feel exactly what he had wanted Felix to feel. And he hated it. That night, Hyunjin couldn't sleep. Rain scratched against the window. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, replaying the last few weeks. He remembered the first time he had noticed Felix looking jealous. It had been almost innocent. Someone had complimented Hyunjin after rehearsal. Felix had smiled and said nothing. But later, while they were walking down the hallway, Felix had asked casually, "You like them?" Hyunjin had laughed. "Why? No reason." Hyunjin had smiled to himself. That had been the beginning. He had enjoyed knowing Felix cared. Then he had wanted more. One reaction became two became three, until jealousy stopped being a playful spark and became a weapon. Hyunjin turned onto his side. His phone was beside his pillow. He opened their conversation. The last message from Felix was 3 days old. It was a photograph of the sunset, no words, just the sky. Hyunjin remembered replying with a heart. Felix had reacted to the message, nothing more. Hyunjin typed, "Are you awake?" He stared at the words, deleted them, typed again, "I'm sorry," deleted that too. Finally he wrote, "Can we talk?" He sent it. The message was seen almost immediately, no reply. Hyunjin waited 1 minute, 5, 10, 20, then the screen lit up. Felix, about what Hyunjin's fingers hovered. He could still lie, he could still make another joke, he could still protect himself. Instead, he typed the truth. "Hyunjin, about why I kept trying to make you jealous." The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then Felix answered, "Felix, you already know why." "Hyunjin, I want to hear you say it." "Felix, you wanted me to care." Hyunjin closed his eyes. "Hyunjin, yes." "Felix, why?" Hyunjin stared at the question for almost a minute. His heartbeat became loud enough to hear. "Because I care too much." He typed it, then erased it. "Because I was scared." He erased that too. Finally, "Hyunjin, because I didn't know if I mattered to you." The response took longer this time. "Felix, you could have asked." "Hyunjin, I was scared." "Felix, so you hurt me instead." Hyunjin's eyes burned. "Hyunjin, I didn't mean to hurt you." "Felix, that doesn't make it hurt less." Hyunjin stopped breathing for a second. "Felix, you kept looking at me to see if I was jealous. Did you ever look at me to see if I was happy?" Hyunjin read the sentence again, then again. He put the phone down. The room was dark except for the city lights outside. For years, Hyunjin had been afraid of being misunderstood. He had never considered how exhausting it must have been for Felix to understand him anyway. The next afternoon, Hyunjin found Felix on the rooftop. The rain had stopped. The concrete still glistened beneath the pale afternoon sun. Felix stood near the railing, holding a paper cup between both hands. Hyunjin stopped several feet away. "Can I come closer?" Felix looked at him, then nodded. Hyunjin approached slowly. He didn't touch him. He didn't joke. He didn't pretend everything was fine. "I'm sorry." Looked toward the city. "You already said that." "I know." "Then why say it again?" "Because the first time I said it, I was sorry that you were hurt." Turned toward him. Now I'm sorry that I was the person who hurt you." Silence. A breeze moved through Felix's hair. Hyunjin took a shaky breath. "I wanted you to be jealous because I was jealous first." Eyes narrowed slightly. "Of who?" "Everyone." That earned a tiny surprised laugh. Hyunjin smiled sadly. "Everyone who could make you smile when I couldn't. Everyone you trusted. Everyone you could talk to without overthinking every word." Felix's smile faded. "Hyunjin, I know how stupid it sounds. It sounds lonely." Hyunjin looked away. That word landed somewhere deeper than he expected. Lonely, yes, that was exactly what it had been. "I was afraid," Hyunjin whispered. "What?" "That if I stopped pretending not to care, you'd realize how much I actually cared." Was silent. Hyunjin continued. "Then you'd have the power to leave." His fingers tightened around the cup. You thought I would leave. I thought everyone eventually leaves. Something shifted in Felix's face. Hyunjin immediately regretted exposing so much. He hated discussing the parts of himself that didn't look beautiful, the parts that were insecure, the parts that needed reassurance, the parts that sometimes turned fear into anger because anger was easier to survive. I should have told you, he said. Yes, I should never have tried to manipulate you. No, not asking you to forgive me immediately. Stared at him. What are you asking for? Hyunjin looked directly into his eyes. One chance to stop making you prove that you care. Lips parted. For several seconds neither spoke, then Felix placed his cup on the railing. You know what hurt the most? Hyunjin's heart sank. What? I would have told you. Tell me what? That you mattered. Hyunjin looked down. Felix continued. You never had to make me jealous. You never had to compete with anyone. You never had to make me chase you. His voice cracked slightly. You only had to ask. Hyunjin's eyes stung. I was afraid you'd say no. Gave him a sad smile. And I was afraid you didn't want to hear yes. Silence between them changed. It was no longer sharp. It was wounded, but wounded things could sometimes heal. Hyunjin stepped closer. Felix. I tell you something selfish. Felix hesitated. Ahead, I don't want you to leave. Looked at him. Hyunjin swallowed. I know wanting you to stay doesn't mean I deserve it. Eyes softened. That's the first honest thing you've said in weeks. Hyunjin laughed quietly. Only the first, maybe the second. What was the first? Felix looked toward the sky. When you admitted you were scared. Hyunjin nodded. The wind moved between them. Then Felix reached for the sleeve of Hyunjin's jacket. He didn't take his hand. He only touched the fabric, a tiny gesture, but Hyunjin felt his entire body go still. Do it again, Felix whispered. Make you jealous. Make me wonder whether you want me. Hyunjin looked down at Felix's fingers. I won't. Don't promise things just because you're scared I'll leave. Hyunjin looked at him. What should I do instead? Felix finally met his eyes. Tell me the truth. Hyunjin nodded. The truth is he stopped. Felix waited. Hyunjin took a breath. The truth is that I missed you before you ever walked away. Felix's eyes glistened. The truth is that I bought you coffee this morning and threw it away because I was embarrassed that I still remembered exactly what you drink. Blinked. You threw away my coffee. I panicked. A laugh escaped Felix. It was small but real. Hyunjin smiled. Truth is that I hate how quiet everything feels when you're not talking to me. Smile disappeared into something softer. The truth is that I don't know what happens next. Looked at him for a long time. Neither do I. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't forgiveness. But Hyunjin understood that it was more honest than anything he had received from Felix in days. And for once he didn't try to force it into something bigger. Weeks passed. Nothing magically returned to normal. That was the difficult part. Hyunjin learned that apologies were not doors that opened immediately. Sometimes they were keys left on the table, waiting for someone to decide whether they wanted to pick them up. Felix still kept a little distance. Hyunjin respected it. When Felix went quiet, Hyunjin didn't chase him. When Felix laughed with someone else, Hyunjin didn't manufacture jealousy. When Hyunjin felt insecure, he tried to name it instead of turning it into a game. Sometimes he failed. Once he became noticeably quiet when Felix spent an entire evening talking to someone else. Felix noticed. Later he found Hyunjin sitting alone in the practice room. You're jealous. Hyunjin looked up. Raised an eyebrow. Hyunjin sighed. Smiled. Thank you for being honest. Hate this, being honest, being emotionally functional. Laughed. Hyunjin smiled despite himself. Then Felix sat beside him, not too close but closer than before. You can tell me, Felix said. Hyunjin looked at him. What you're feeling? Hyunjin stared at the floor. I felt left out. Nodded. Okay, stupid. I wanted your attention. Smiled. That isn't stupid, it feels stupid. Allowed to want attention from someone you care about. Hyunjin's chest tight. Do you care about me? Felix became quiet. Hyunjin immediately realized the mistake. Sorry. No. Looked at him. I'm thinking. Hyunjin waited. Felix rubbed his thumb against his phone. Then he said, I care about you enough that what you did hurt. Hyunjin's eyes lowered. I care about you enough that I'm still here. Hyunjin looked up. Felix didn't smile. He didn't make the moment easier. He simply let the truth exist between them. Hyunjin whispered, thank you. Leaned back. Thank me yet. I'm still angry sometimes. Hyunjin nodded. You can be. Sometimes I still wonder if you're going to do it again. That one hurt, but Hyunjin didn't defend himself. I understand. Looked surprised. You do? No. Laughed. Hyunjin smiled. I want to. That answer seemed to matter. Little by little the distance changed, not disappeared, changed. One evening after rehearsal, Felix stayed behind. Hyunjin was putting his shoes away when Felix approached. Hyunjin, you busy? Hyunjin looked at him. No, Felix hesitated. Do you want to get some?
The next morning, Felix woke before his alarm. For several seconds he remained still beneath the blanket, staring at the pale ceiling while the memory of the previous night returned in fragments. Hyunjin's hand around his, the warmth of his shoulder, the quiet confession, I'm glad you finally learned how to ask me to stay. Felix pressed his lips together, trying not to smile. It didn't work. His phone vibrated on the bedside table. A message from Hyunjin. Hyunjin, are you awake? Felix stared at it. Felix, no, the reply came immediately. Hyunjin, that explains why you're replying. Felix laughed into his pillow. Felix, why are you awake? Hyunjin, because someone kept stealing my blanket yesterday. Felix, I wasn't there. Hyunjin, emotionally you were. Felix rolled his eyes. Felix, go back to sleep. Hyunjin, I can't. Felix, why? There was a pause. Then, Hyunjin, because I'm thinking about you. Felix's smile disappeared. Not because the message was unpleasant, because it was exactly the kind of sentence that would have terrified him months ago. Back then, he would have wondered what Hyunjin meant. Was it teasing? Was it manipulation? Was he trying to make Felix react? Now, for the first time, Felix allowed himself to believe that maybe Hyunjin simply meant what he said. Felix, you're getting cheesy. Hyunjin, you like it. Felix, unfortunately. Hyunjin, so you admit you like me. Felix stared at the screen. Heart gave one hard beat. Felix, go to sleep. Hyunjin, coward. Felix smiled. Felix, good night. Hyunjin, it's morning. Felix, exactly. He placed the phone face down, but the smile remained. It lasted until he reached the studio. Then he saw Hyunjin and the smile became something else. Hyunjin was standing near the mirror, stretching one leg against the wall. His hair was tied loosely, several strands falling across his forehead. He noticed Felix through the reflection. Their eyes met. Hyunjin smiled, not the teasing smile he used when he wanted to provoke Felix. Not the charming smile he showed other people. This one was smaller, private. Felix hated how quickly his heart recognized it. Morning, Hyunjin said. Morning. Hyunjin lowered his leg. You slept? Yes. About me. Felix gave him a flat stare. Do you ever stop sometimes? When I'm asleep? Shook his head. Hyunjin laughed. Everything felt normal, almost. Then someone entered the room. Hyunjin, can you help me with something? Hyunjin turned. Felix's expression changed before he could stop it. The other person stepped closer, holding a phone. Hyunjin looked at the screen. Sure. Immediately looked away. He hated the reaction. He hated the sudden warmth behind his ears. He hated the old instinct that whispered, you're going to lose him again. Except this time, the jealousy wasn't caused by Hyunjin. That was what made it different. Hyunjin noticed. Of course he noticed. He always noticed Felix. A few minutes later, Hyunjin approached. You're quiet. Fine. Hyunjin tilted his head. Felix sighed. Don't what? Look at me like that. What? Like you know something? Hyunjin's mouth curved upward. I do know something. Narrowed his eyes. What? You're jealous. Felix's face immediately warmed. No, yes, not. Hyunjin. They stared at each other, then Hyunjin laughed. Felix turned away. You're annoying. Tell me. You what? What you're feeling. Stopped. The words were so familiar that something inside him softened. Tell me what you're feeling. Once, Felix had begged for that kind of honesty. Now Hyunjin was offering it freely. Felix looked at him. I felt jealous. Hyunjin's teasing expression disappeared. Okay, blinked. That's it. What do you want me to do? I don't know. Hyunjin stepped closer. Do you want reassurance? Felix looked away. His voice became quieter. Maybe. Hyunjin nodded. Okay. Didn't laugh. He didn't tease. He didn't use Felix's jealousy to make himself feel powerful. He simply stood there. I'm not interested in replacing you. His eyes lifted. Hyunjin continued. If something bothers you, you can tell me. Swallowed. Even if it's stupid. Especially if you think it's stupid. Looked down, something warm settled inside his chest. Thanks. Hyunjin smiled, then very quietly he added, and for the record, you're cute when you're jealous. Eyes widened. There it is. What? You ruined it. Hyunjin laughed. Felix shoved his shoulder. Hyunjin caught his wrist. For a second, neither moved. Their faces were closer than they expected. The laughter faded. Felix felt Hyunjin's fingers loosen immediately. Hyunjin let go. The small gesture mattered. Felix noticed. He always noticed now. Later that afternoon, they were rehearsing when Felix made a mistake. It was small, a missed count, nothing serious, but Felix froze. His breathing changed. Hyunjin recognized it instantly. Felix. Fine. The music stopped. Felix looked toward the mirror. His reflection seemed harsher than usual. His shoulders were tense. His fingers curled tightly. Again, Felix said. Someone started the music. Hyunjin stopped them. Wait, turned. What? You need a minute. I said I'm fine. I know. Then why are you stopping? Because I know you. His jaw tightened. That doesn't mean you know everything. The room went quiet. Hyunjin stared at him. Felix immediately regretted it. He looked away. Sorry. Hyunjin didn't respond with anger. He simply nodded. Okay, that was it. No argument, no retaliation. Felix felt worse, because once upon a time, Hyunjin would have pushed back. He would have turned the moment into a fight. Now he was giving Felix room. And Felix suddenly realized that he was the one carrying the fear this time. The fear that if he showed too much, Hyunjin would eventually become tired of him. After rehearsal, Felix found Hyunjin sitting alone. The studio lights were off except for the ones near the mirror. You're still here. Hyunjin looked up, apparently. Stood near the doorway. Are you mad? No. Really. Walked closer. I was rude. You were overwhelmed. That doesn't excuse it. No. Sat beside him for a while. They listened to the air conditioner hum. Then Felix whispered, sometimes I get scared. Hyunjin turned. What? That I'm going to become too much. Hyunjin's expression softened. Felix stared at his hands. Too emotional, too sensitive, too needy. I know you're going to say I'm not. I was going to say you don't have to earn the right to have feelings. Stopped. Hyunjin continued. You don't have to make yourself smaller because you're afraid someone will leave. Eyes burned. You really changed. Hyunjin laughed quietly. Say that like I've become a completely different species. Smiled. I mean it. Hyunjin looked down. I'm still scared. Of what? That I'll mess this up again. Turned toward him. Hyunjin's fingers moved restlessly over his knee. When things are good, I sometimes start waiting for them to go wrong. Understood immediately. Because you think happiness doesn't last. Hyunjin nodded. Felix was quiet, then he placed his hand over Hyunjin's. Hyunjin stopped moving. You don't have to be perfect, Felix said. Hyunjin looked at him. Neither do you. Squeezed his hand. Deal. Hyunjin nodded. Deal. They remained like that for several minutes. No jealousy, no games, no tests, just honesty. Then Hyunjin's phone vibrated. He glanced at it. His expression changed. Felix noticed immediately. What? Nothing. Stared. Hyunjin hesitated, then he handed over the phone. It was a message from an unknown number. There was no name, only a photograph. Felix opened it. His face went pale. It was an old photograph of Felix and Hyunjin together, not a public photograph, not something from a stage. It had clearly been taken secretly. Felix looked at Hyunjin. Where did this come from? I don't know. Message appeared. You two should be more careful. Hyunjin's jaw tightened. Felix stared at the screen. A strange coldness spread through him. The room suddenly felt different, too quiet, too exposed. Hyunjin took the phone. Respond. I wasn't going to. Who could have this? Felix shook his head. I don't know. Vibration. Hyunjin looked down. The new message contained another photograph. This time it showed them leaving the building together. The image had been taken recently, very recently. Felix's stomach tightened. Hyunjin stood. Stay here. Immediately grabbed his wrist. No. Hyunjin looked at him. Felix, not going alone. Not going anywhere. Then why did you say stay here? Hyunjin glanced toward the door. I need to check something. Stood too. Coming. Hyunjin looked like he wanted to argue, then he stopped. He remembered. No more making decisions for Felix, no more assuming what was best. Okay, they left together. The hallway was empty. Their footsteps echoed. Felix stayed close. What if someone is following us? Then we don't panic. Not panicking. You're holding my sleeve. Looked down. His fingers were gripping Hyunjin's sleeve tightly. He released it immediately. I was checking if the fabric was good. Hyunjin stared at him. Felix looked away. Hyunjin almost smiled, but the tension returned when they reached the exit. The street outside was crowded. Cars moved through the wet road. People hurried beneath umbrellas. Nothing looked unusual. That somehow made it worse. Hyunjin scanned the area. Do you see anyone? No. Looked behind them. Nothing. Hyunjin checked his phone. No new message. They walked toward the car. Halfway there, Felix stopped. Hyunjin pointed across the street. Someone stood beneath a dark umbrella. Their face was hidden. Hyunjin followed his gaze. The figure remained still. Then the umbrella lowered slightly. Felix's breath caught. He couldn't see the person clearly, but he recognized the jacket. His blood went cold. Hyunjin noticed his expression. Who is it? Felix shook his head. Not sure. Person turned. Walked away. Hyunjin stepped forward. Wait. Caught his arm. Hyunjin stopped. The figure disappeared into the crowd. Felix stared at the place where they had vanished. Hyunjin asked. Felix swallowed. I think I know them. Who? Felix didn't answer immediately. There was an old memory buried inside him. A memory he had never told Hyunjin. A memory from before everything between them had become complicated. A memory of someone who had once warned Felix that being close to Hyunjin would eventually destroy both of them. Someone Felix had believed he would never see again. Felix, he finally looked at Hyunjin. I need to tell you something. Hyunjin's expression became serious. What? Felix stared at the crowd. I think this started long before you tried to make me jealous. Hyunjin went still. Felix's voice dropped. And I think someone has been watching us for much longer than we realized. Felix's words remained between them. I think someone has been watching us for much longer than we realized. Hyunjin stared at him. The noise of the city seemed to fade beneath the sudden weight of those words. Felix, he said carefully, what do you mean? Felix looked down. His fingers had begun trembling. Hyunjin noticed immediately. He reached for Felix's hand but stopped before touching him. The hesitation was deliberate, a question without words. Felix looked at his hand. Then at Hyunjin, finally, Felix placed his fingers into his. I never told you because I thought it was over. What was over? Someone used to send me messages. Hyunjin's expression hardened. When? Before all of this, before we started fighting, before you started trying to make me jealous. Swallowed. Weren't threatening at first. They were just strange. What did they say? That I should stay away from you. Hyunjin's grip tightened. Felix continued. They said I didn't understand what I was getting myself into. They said eventually one of us would get hurt. Hyunjin stared at him. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought you'd blame yourself. I would have helped you. I know. Then why? Felix looked at him. Because I was scared. Answer silenced Hyunjin. Felix looked toward the road. I was scared that if I told you, you'd start distancing yourself from me to protect me. Hyunjin's eyes softened. And I was scared that if I told you how much I cared about you, you'd realize you could hurt me. Gave a small, painful smile. We were both idiots. Hyunjin almost laughed. Absolutely. For the first time since seeing the photographs, the tension loosened slightly. Then Hyunjin's phone vibrated. Both of them froze. A new message. Hyunjin looked down. Another photograph. This time it was not of Felix and Hyunjin. It was a photograph of the person beneath the umbrella. The face was visible. Felix's heart stopped. He knew him, not personally, but enough. He had seen that face years ago, during a period when Felix had been struggling to understand why someone kept interfering whenever he and Hyunjin became close. The person wasn't a stranger. He was someone from their professional circle, someone who had always been nearby, someone who had repeatedly insisted that Felix and Hyunjin should maintain distance. Hyunjin stared at the picture. You know him? Felix nodded. Why? I don't know. Hyunjin looked at him. Then we find out. They did, not by chasing the person, not by confronting him alone, and not by turning fear into another impulsive decision. They brought the matter to the appropriate people and showed every message and photograph they had received. The investigation revealed something neither of them expected. The photographs had been taken by someone who had access to places around them, but the person they had seen beneath the umbrella had not been the one sending the messages. He had been trying to warn Felix. The mysterious messages had been coming from someone else, someone who had been obsessed with controlling the image of their relationship from the beginning. The truth was ugly, but it was also strangely relieving. For months, Felix had wondered whether every strange moment had been his imagination. It hadn't. There really had been someone watching. There really had been someone manipulating situations around them. But the most painful discovery wasn't the existence of the person. It was realizing how easily their own fears had done the rest. Hyunjin had been afraid of losing Felix. Felix had been afraid of being abandoned. Instead of talking about those fears, they had allowed them to grow. Hyunjin had turned jealousy into a weapon. Felix had turned silence into protection. And both had nearly destroyed something neither of them wanted to lose. Several days later, everything finally became quiet. No more anonymous messages arrived. No more photographs appeared. The person responsible was being dealt with through the proper channels. But Felix still found himself waking in the middle of the night. Sometimes he checked his phone. Sometimes he stared at the ceiling. Sometimes he wondered whether another message would appear. One night he found Hyunjin sitting alone in the studio. The room was almost completely dark. Only the city lights outside illuminated his face. Felix walked in. "You're still awake?" Hyunjin looked over, apparently, smiled faintly. He sat beside him for a while, neither spoke. Then Hyunjin said, "I thought about something." "What?" That night. Knew immediately which night. The night Hyunjin had told him to leave. The night everything had almost broken. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't walked out." Looked at him. "I probably would have stayed." "I know. You probably would have kept pretending nothing was wrong." Hyunjin sighed. "I know." Looked at the floor. "I hated leaving." Hyunjin turned toward him. "What?" "I hated it." Felix's voice became quieter. "I wanted you to stop me." Hyunjin's expression changed. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to know without me having to ask." Hyunjin lowered his gaze. "That sounds familiar." Smiled sadly. "Yeah." They sat in silence. Then Hyunjin whispered, "I almost lost you." Looked at him. "You didn't." "I almost did, but you didn't. You came back." Felix shook his head. "No." Hyunjin frowned. "Then why?" "Because you changed." Hyunjin said nothing. Felix continued. "You didn't chase me when I left. You didn't manipulate me. You didn't make another scene." Looked directly at Hyunjin. "You finally let me choose." Hyunjin's eyes became glassy. "And you chose me." Felix smiled. "Sitting here, aren't I?" Hyunjin laughed softly. A tear escaped before he could hide it. Felix noticed. He always noticed. "Hey." Hyunjin wiped his cheek quickly. "Don't. You're crying." "No, I'm not." "You literally are." "It's the air." Laughed. "The air made you cry." "Yes." "Emotional air." Laughed harder, and Hyunjin finally smiled. A real smile, the kind Felix had missed. Then the laughter slowly faded. Hyunjin looked at him. "Can I tell you something?" Felix nodded. "I don't want us to become the kind of people who only know how to love each other when everything is falling apart." Felix's smile disappeared. "I don't either. I don't want another dramatic fight just so we can finally admit what we're feeling." "Me neither. I don't want jealousy. Definitely not. I don't want games." Again, Hyunjin looked at him. "Then what do we want?" Felix thought about it. "Something boring." Hyunjin blinked. "Boring? Yeah, that's your romantic answer." Felix smiled. "I want mornings where you annoy me before I've had coffee." Hyunjin smiled. "I can do that." "I want arguments about what to eat." "Easy." "I want you stealing my snacks." "You steal mine." "I want you to stop pretending you don't care when you clearly do." Hyunjin became quiet. Felix's voice softened. "And I want to know that if you're scared, you'll tell me instead of trying to make me jealous." Hyunjin nodded. "Promise." Immediately shook his head. "Don't promise." Hyunjin looked confused. "Why?" "Because I don't need a perfect promise." Reached for his hand. "I need you to try." Hyunjin stared at their hands, then he squeezed Felix's fingers. "I can do that." Leaned his head against Hyunjin's shoulder. For a long time they remained there. The city outside continued moving. Cars passed. Rain began tapping against the windows again. Somewhere in the building, a door closed. Life continued, and for the first time in months, neither of them felt the need to run after it. A few weeks later, they returned to the same rooftop where they had first spoken honestly. The sky was clear. The city stretched beneath them, bright and endless. Felix leaned against the railing. Hyunjin stood beside him. "You're quiet." "I'm thinking." "That's dangerous." Laughed. "You've used that joke before." "It's still funny." "No, it isn't." "It is." Shook his head, then he looked at Hyunjin. "Do you remember what you told me here?" Hyunjin smiled. "A lot of things. You said you didn't know what would happen next." "I still don't." Nodded. "Neither do I." Hyunjin looked at him. "And that's okay." Smiled. "Yeah." Wind moved through Hyunjin's hair. Felix reached out and fixed one loose strand. Hyunjin went still. "You're staring again," Felix whispered. "I'm allowed." "You're beautiful." Felix's cheeks warmed. "That was terrible." "You liked it." "I didn't." "You're blushing." "It's cold." "It's not." Shoved his shoulder. Hyunjin laughed, then Felix became serious. "Hyunjin, thank you." What, for letting me leave? Hyunjin's smile faded. Felix continued. If you had chased me that night just because you were afraid, I might have stayed for the wrong reason. Hyunjin looked at him. You let me go? I didn't want to. I know. I wanted to run after you. I know. Why didn't you? Hyunjin looked toward the city. Because for once I understood that loving you didn't mean holding you tightly enough that you couldn't leave. Felix's eyes softened. It meant trusting you. Reached for his hand, their fingers intertwined. Now Hyunjin looked at him. Now I trust you. Smiled. Even when I'm jealous, especially then. Laughed. If you get jealous, I'll tell you, without making me jealous first. Hyunjin grimaced. I'm never going to live that down, am I? No. Faya leaned closer. His head rested against Hyunjin's shoulder. Hyunjin rested his cheek lightly against Felix's hair. There was no dramatic music, no crowd, no perfect declaration, just the quiet sound of their breathing and the distant hum of the city. For a long time, Hyunjin had believed love needed to be dramatic to be real. He had believed jealousy meant someone cared. He had believed fear could be disguised as confidence. He had believed that if Felix truly loved him, Felix would never walk away. He had been wrong. Felix had walked away. And that had been the moment Hyunjin finally understood the truth. Love was not proven by how much pain someone could endure for you. It wasn't measured by jealousy. It wasn't tested through silence, and it wasn't secured by making someone afraid to lose you. Love was a choice, every day, sometimes loud, sometimes quiet, sometimes as simple as asking, "Are you okay?" Sometimes as difficult as admitting, "I'm scared," sometimes as brave as saying, "I need you," and sometimes the most loving thing you could do was open your hand and let someone decide whether they wanted to take it. Felix squeezed Hyunjin's fingers. Hyunjin looked down. Felix smiled. What? Nothing. You're doing it again. Doing what? Looking at me like you're trying to memorize my face. Hyunjin's expression softened. Maybe I am. Stared at him, then he whispered, "You don't have to. I'm not going anywhere." Hyunjin's breath caught. Felix smiled. Because you made me stay. Hyunjin looked at him. Because I want to. Something inside Hyunjin finally became still. He didn't need to ask again. He didn't need to test it. He didn't need proof. He simply held Felix's hand. And Felix held his back. The first time Hyunjin had tried to make Felix jealous, he had wanted to hear one sentence, "Don't leave me." He had wanted Felix to say it desperately. Instead, Felix had walked away, and somehow that was the thing that saved them. Because when Felix returned, it wasn't because Hyunjin had manipulated him into staying. It was because they had finally learned how to choose each other without fear. The rain began falling harder. Felix looked toward the sky. "We should go." "Yeah." Neither moved. Felix laughed. "You said we should go." "I know." "Then move." "You move." Hyunjin shook his head, laughing. Then he pulled Hyunjin toward the door. Hyunjin followed. Their footsteps echoed through the empty hallway. Felix's hand remained in his. And this time Hyunjin didn't hold too tightly. He didn't need to. Felix wasn't staying because he was afraid to leave. He was staying because after everything, he had found a reason to choose Hyunjin again. And Hyunjin finally understood that was the only kind of staying that mattered.